It's a great day to be here with you, and this is Planet Earth. Thank you for welcoming us into your day. I'm Jay.
And I'm Keats, and welcome to episode 5 of This is Planet Earth.
That's right. This episode is some pro tips on Earth caching from our friend who got the dress code memo, Matt Dawson. Hey, Matt, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jay. Hi, Keats. And thanks a lot for having me on the show today.
It's our pleasure. For those who may not be familiar with you, could you share a little bit about yourself and your role with the GSA? It sounds very official.
Yeah. All right. Well, since 2010, I've been working at GSA, which is the Geological Society of America. And I'm currently the Education Programs Manager. And in that role, I oversee a number of different education and outreach programs that are all related to the earth sciences. So these include internships in national parks and national forests and other public lands, student research grants, teacher workshops, and outreach to the general public as well. And as the Education Programs Manager, I'm not a spokesperson or official representative of GSA, but I can speak about my experiences with GSA's education programs.
Wow, that sounds like an excellent job. How does your role with the GSA connect with the idea of earth caching?
Right, yeah, earth caching is pretty much the main way that GSA works to bring earth science awareness to the general public. And so I'm GSA's coordinator for earth caching, and I get to collaborate with the staff at geocaching headquarters and the great international team of volunteer geo-awares, or the EarthCache reviewers who really keep the program ticking.
Wow, what a great job.
It's a lot of fun.
Oh man, let us know if you need, to expand into Canada or something like that. You'll have a couple of volunteers.
You guys have a great, I forget the official name, but there is a Canadian Geological Society, and they do great work, and we collaborate with them sometimes.
Very cool. Well, we'll have to find out more about that. We definitely have some geologist friends up here. We've just never asked them about it. So, Keats, make a note. We'll put it on the list.
I will make a mental note, and we'll get some notes down. And yeah,
awesome. So, Matt, obviously, we're really keen to talk about earth caches. What do you enjoy most about them?
Earth caches are a lot of fun. It's a really enjoyable part of my job. And the thing I love the most is just seeing that people are getting excited about a geological feature out there somewhere on the planet. And they're excited enough that they want to study it and develop an EarthCache page about it to share their excitement and knowledge with other people. In the education business, we often say that to really understand something, you've got to teach it to others. And EarthCaching really enables that. And I also really enjoy how it brings together two communities with different focuses, but that have overlapping interests. So that's the geocaching community and the geological community.
Yes, and earth caches are really such a great way of introducing people to geology. If someone is interested in creating their own earth cache, do they need to be a geologist? What kind of basic earth science should they possess?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to create your own earth cache, you definitely do not need to be a geologist. And the way the program was developed, and I think this is reflected in the guidelines as well, it's that you don't need to be an expert in geology to log an earth cache or even to develop one. An earth cache shouldn't read like a PhD thesis or an article in a technical journal. It should be understandable to the average person and the average geocacher. And then regarding the basics of earth science that somebody should know, I'd say you can start off with really little to no earth science knowledge at all at the beginning. And I think the main things to have are, experience with geocaching, experience logging multiple earth caches, so go out and find some. And there are some other skills that are like the skills of a geologist rather than the background knowledge. So, I think of it more in terms of the skills, and those are things like the willingness to do the research and to learn about the location, observation skills, the ability to write and present information clearly. But if I did have to recommend basic geological knowledge that somebody should seek to have, I'd mention plate tectonics, because it's the fundamental theory behind most of Earth science, rock and mineral types and how to identify them, and weathering and erosion, how it shapes the Earth's surface. Those are some of the main areas that I think are a good basis.
Those each sound like a great future episode unto themselves.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So we've talked about, who can earth cache. We did a previous episode where we really went deep between Keats and I into that, but having you've kind of reinforced a lot of the stuff that we had said previously, which is great because it means we weren't wrong. So I like that. But I really like the fact that you've expressed it so clearly that you don't need to be a geologist, but you do need to have some. You need to be willing to do some research. You need to have some basic skills that you should consider developing if you don't have them in ACEs. So let's say you're like, okay, I'm pretty keen on my research. My observation skills are good. I know I can write and present things clearly. So I feel like I've got those skill sets that I need to create an earth cache, and I've gone to a location where I'm looking at something fantastic. So let's say I'm here. I'm looking at these sea stacks behind me. So for those listening to the audio, my video background has sea stacks on it. And so I come there and I go, man, there should be an earth cache here. What's the next thing that I should do to get ready to start creating an earth cache?
I'd say, the very next step to take would be to make really detailed observations, write down notes, take photographs, make some sketches perhaps, and get all the information, all the data that you need, so that when you get home, you're fully equipped to write up that earth cache page. So making those observations is really key. And while you're there, you also want to pick the focus for what the lesson of your earth cache is going to be. Because you don't want to cover too much information. You don't want to try to explain the entire geological history of the rocks that are now those sea stacks. And it's good to figure out the focus while you're at the site, because that focus will guide your observations. And if you know that you're focused on the sea stacks, that's what you're going to make your sketches and photographs of, rather than maybe there's a sand dunes nearby or something, and that's not the focus of your earth cache. And I would even say at the very top of your earth cache page, you explain what that focus is, so that people understand what it is you're trying to get across, what your main theme is.
That actually, sorry, Matt, just to interject, yeah. That's a really good pro tip, is to right at the top of the earth cache have some sort of summary that says, this is what we're going to learn about. I like that.
Yeah, just tell people, it's not, again, you're not trying to give the broad geological history or the full background of a location. I really think the best earth caches are the ones that have the most focus. And there might be other geological features at that site that you'd like to talk about, but you don't necessarily need to. People will see them on their own, or push that to the bottom of the earth cache page, but really hone in on what it is you're trying to get across. I think that's key.
Yeah, simplicity is great to have in earth caches. I believe, like when I'm at an earth cache site and I'm at this rock, you're right. I don't need to see the whole geological history. I just like to see some details about a certain thing, and kind of have a general understanding and where to move forward and how to answer those questions. How can I figure out what sorts of questions to put in my earth cache if I'm creating one?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because I think the questions that you ask in an earth cache and the logging tasks are really the backbone of the earth cache. And there's a lot I could say about the logging tasks. That's a whole other episode, I suppose. But I'll give a few key tips here. I think the logging tasks, it goes along with the focus. You figure out the focus and theme of your EarthCache, and the logging tasks should match and emphasize that focus. And I really think they should be the first thing you work on. What is it you're going to ask somebody to do when they arrive at this EarthCache, and then build everything around that. And the EarthCaches, you don't have to have a lot of them. 1, 2, or 3. EarthCaches, the logging tasks. You don't need. We want lots of EarthCaches, right? But for the logging tasks, you only need 1, 2, or 3, really, if they're strong logging tasks. I don't think a lot of people want to be doing 5, 8, 9 logging tasks. So focus on just having a few really strong logging tasks that fit the theme really well. And logging tasks should be site specific. Again, that's really important, that it's something that a person can only answer if they really are at the location. And it gets them to combine the observations that they make at the site along with some of the information that you've provided in your cache page. So you give them just enough information that they can take that and then go and make their observations, and then they can do those 2 or 3 logging tasks. And then you're satisfied that they've been there based on the answers. And more importantly to us, really, that the visitors have gotten a good geological lesson.
Nice.
Very cool. So much great stuff, just taking it all in. Matt, you had mentioned in some of the notes when we were prepping for this earlier, and certainly talking about that the logging tasks don't need to be complicated, etc. But and you just mentioned that to the GSA, it's really about the learning experience. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that learning experience?
Yeah, to get a good learning experience, you don't have to have a logging task doesn't have to be something that has a specific answer necessarily. Like, you're not looking for the width of the glacial erratic. Questions like that, they're not really thought provoking. So you really want to get somebody to think about the geology around them, and to be making their own observations, to have kind of like an experience similar to what you had when you visited the site, and to go through the process that you went through when you were making your observations and studying and researching the location. And you were making your own discoveries about the site. So you want to sort of lead visitors to your EarthCache to have those same types of discoveries for themselves. So there doesn't need to be a correct answer. Open-ended questions, I think, can be a really great type of logging task, where in the act of answering the question, you as a cache owner can tell, based on how a person answers, that they really were there, based on their observations and their descriptions of the site. And again, you're not looking for necessarily a certain answer, but you can tell, yeah, this person really was there, taking in the geology, and making those observations and having that good experience.
The what do you see question is actually a pretty important one, because if they're just like, I see a crystal, and what the EarthCache is really taking you to is a waterfall, then they either have to be more specific or they just weren't there.
Or they're being way too specific.
Exactly, being specific about what you see. And I think adding those details in the question can help understand that, yes, this person did in fact visit the EarthCache, and they have learned something.
And they might point out things that you didn't notice. If you give them kind of the space within your logging tasks to talk about what they saw, you might learn that you as the cache owner might learn something in turn based on the observations of all the different visitors. Again, I think that's more likely to occur if you keep things a little more open-ended, and also asking about like the reasoning or the why behind things. Okay, so you've made this observation, but why does the geology look like that here? And you might not know the answer. The background reading you did might not tell you the answer. Maybe nobody knows, but they could still go through like that scientific reasoning process, trying to explain why the rocks look the way they do at this location.
I'm really glad you brought that last point up, because that's one of the things in my experience that makes the better EarthCache questions are the ones that are, as you said, Matt, that are open-ended, but that are those why questions. So it's like, we gave you some basic geology lessons earlier in the description. You've come to the site. Maybe, you know, Keats has talked about interpretive signs before in a previous episode. So maybe there's some interpretive signs you can read, and that's all great. And that gives you a good foundation. But, you know, look at, you know, so again, we'll use the C stacks, but like, look at these C stacks, you know, why are there this number of them? Why do you think that they're broken up like this? Right. So it's like, you understand how they were formed because we told you, but why do you think they ended up like this? Right. I think that's the kind of stuff that, as you said earlier, like, really try and relive the experience you had when you first went there through your questions. That's some really great advice, Matt. Thank you.
I believe, sorry, I believe that there was a question in one of the EarthCaches. Before I forget, it was in an EarthCache I did in Nova Scotia in Cape Split, and depending on how high the tide was, depended on how many sea stacks you saw. So, you know, the EarthCache owner received different answers depending on the levels of the tide. I think if the tide was really low, there were about 6, and they were all in a row. Mm-hmm. And then depending on how high the tide was, sometimes it could just be 3. But yeah, no, I just thought that was an interesting, speaking of sea stacks. Yeah, it's kind of interesting also how maybe tides affect different things as well. And I guess we'll get into another episode about that. But yeah, there's just an endless cornucopia of EarthCache topics.
Well, sure. You have me missing sea stacks now. I used to live in New England, and I haven't been around sea stacks in a while. So I'll have to seek out a sea stack EarthCache.
Once the borders open up, come on up. We'll take you to sea stacks.
Siwash Rock.
There you go.
Good one.
So we talked earlier about pictures, and you had indicated that taking pictures is a really great way for you to make sure that when you create the EarthCache, you don't forget some of the details, and that you can kind of help. It will help you. I'm stumbling over my words this morning. It'll help you to create a better EarthCache content. Is it important to include the pictures in the EarthCache description itself? And if I include pictures, do they need to be the ones that I take?
I think it's really important to include pictures. They're not required by any means. There are some really good EarthCaches that don't have pictures, but I consider it a best practice to include them. Geology is really a visual science, and pictures can really help people understand the local setting and the landscape. And photographs are great, but drawings can also be a powerful addition to an EarthCache page, because sometimes sketches can highlight and bring out features that a photograph just can't do so well. And geologists consider sketching to be an important skill because of that fact. And
interesting.
Yeah, and I think that relates back to logging tasks as well. Sketching can be a good thing to ask as part of your logging tasks. And I think including your own pictures is the best way to go, because those are going to be more strongly connected to the focus of your EarthCache. You know what it is you're trying to teach through your EarthCache, so your photographs are going to be more focused on that topic versus ones that you find online. But you can use other people's photos, but we do ask that you cite the source of the photographs, just like you would with the other information that's on the cache page.
Nice. And I suppose as with any geocache, there are some hoops you have to jump through to get it published on the website, perhaps. And what kinds of questions will the EarthCache reviewers want to know when I submit a cache, an EarthCache for publishing? Is it just as simple as I placed an EarthCache here and check the questions and good to go, or do I need to provide more detail than that? I'm sure I do, but
Yeah, it's another great question, and I'm really glad you asked about the review process, because the reviewers really are the backbone of the EarthCache program, and they're known as geo-awares. That's the nickname that the various reviewers go by, and they're spread all across the world, and each reviewer focuses on a specific geographic region, and there are some specific things that they like to see with your EarthCache submission. And they've got a lot of experience reviewing EarthCaches. The reviewers have also, for the most part, developed a lot of EarthCaches of their own and logged many EarthCaches. So they're really a great resource, and I like to think of them as the EarthCache think tank, really. And I encourage cache owners to see them as a resource for helping them to not just get the cache published, but also to make their EarthCache the best that it can be. And some of the things they'll like to see up front are, a note about permission, if permission is needed from the local landowner or land manager. And if you as the cache owner think that you don't need permission to develop an EarthCache at that location, then it's helpful if you can explain to the reviewer why you believe that that's the case, that there is no permission needed. And we talked about logging tasks. So make great logging tasks, and also provide your expected answers to those logging tasks to the reviewer, because that'll help them judge if those logging tasks meet the guidelines, and it'll also help them understand if you're providing a good and focused earth science lesson. And then it's also helpful, I think, if you let the reviewer know about other similar EarthCaches that are in the area, if there are any, because that's something they're going to look for. Did somebody already cover these sea stacks, a kilometer south from here? And if so, what makes your EarthCache unique, and why would somebody, why do we need to teach the lesson here when it's already taught a kilometer away? So if there are no other similar EarthCaches to yours, you might point that out. And the nearest one is 500 kilometers away, and it's focused on the patterns of erosion and the sea stacks, whereas mine is focused on how the rock type here is unique from the other rocks along the coastline in this area. So help the reviewer along in judging the uniqueness of your EarthCache. I think that would be helpful too.
Yeah, it's the whole question of what is the difference between this glacial erratic versus this glacial erratic. So yeah, I agree. I think it's good to have just to reduce the redundancy of EarthCache topics in a certain area. We have heard about the Planetary Geology EarthCache initiative that's going on. What is that all about?
Yeah, the Planetary Geology EarthCache initiative has been a lot of fun to work on, especially this week. And the idea was really spurred by the Mars 2020 mission and the Perseverance rover, which has the trackable code on the calibration target for one of its cameras. And it just landed yesterday, and it was a pretty exciting day in the earth science community and the geocaching community. So the idea was to expand on the connections between geocaching and science on Mars, and to build on the enthusiasm in the geocaching community for Mars. So geocaching headquarters approached GSA, and they had the idea to develop a series of EarthCaches that would highlight Martian geology. And over time, the idea developed into the Planetary Geology on Earth series of EarthCaches. And these are EarthCaches that teach lessons about geological features on Earth that are analogous to features on Mars. And the goal is to help people see how geologists can study one planet to learn about another. And it really does go both ways. There are things that planetary geologists can discover on Mars that actually help us get a better understanding of Earth and its history, and vice versa, of course.
Fascinating. Yeah. So I think probably all of us are watched or were aware in some degree or another of Perseverance landing yesterday. So for those who are listening to the podcast or watching the video, now you know when we recorded it. But one of the things that I found interesting was there was some discussion about the dust and on the surface of the planet and the formations of the craters and things like that. And they started talking about some of that. And I'm like, yeah, these relate to topics that I've learned through earth sciences and earth caching. So I definitely can see the tie-in there. And I think it's really cool. Matt, if I wanted to include my earth cache or an earth cache I'm creating in the Planetary Geology EarthCache initiative, what do I need to do?
All right. Well, if you're interested in having an earth cache be included as part of the Planetary Geology on Earth initiative, I would definitely recommend going to GSA's website at www.geosociety.org/planetary. And that's a page that we set up just for this project. And we have some good examples of earth caches that connect Earth and Mars. And we have an outline of the basic steps that you need to follow and naming conventions and all that. And there's also a good library of planetary geology resources that I put together specifically for this initiative. So it has ideas for topics to cover, such as various features that are found both on Earth and Mars, like volcanoes, impact craters, sand dunes, canyons, landslides. I don't think sea stacks are part of that, but maybe they'll find those on Mars at some point. And there are also some articles about how scientists do comparative studies between Earth and Mars. And some of the articles are more technical and are from GSA publications and other scientific publishers like the Smithsonian Institution. And as with any Earth cache, I definitely recommend keeping it focused and straightforward. Pick a topic and stick with that. And pick a really good site, a site that can help to essentially transport somebody to the surface of Mars by looking at geology here on Earth.
I'm just looking forward to Mars caches, one of these days. Matt, if I wanted to learn more about the Geological Society of America and the education programs there, where would I go?
GSA has a large online presence, and our main website is www.geosociety.org. And we're also really active on social media, so you can follow us on Facebook. On Facebook, we're facebook.com/GSA.1888, which is the year of our founding. We celebrated our 125th anniversary just a few years ago. And we also have a Facebook page for earth caching too, and it's facebook.com/EarthCache. Pretty easy to find.
Cool.
Very cool. Yeah, and definitely we'll make sure that on the bottom of the screen here, for those who are watching the video, we'll have all those links, so you can check that out, as well as in the description of the video. Matt, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope to have you come back soon and discuss more geology and earth caching topics with us. In the meantime, if someone wanted to contact you, if they've got some questions for you, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, all right. Well, Jay and Keats, I wanted to say thanks so much for having me on today. It's been a pleasure talking with you about earth caches, and I really appreciate the work you're doing to help to teach people about earth science and earth caching. And the best way for people to get in touch with me is via email, mdawson@geosociety.org. And I also manage GSA's Facebook page for the EarthCache program, which I mentioned previously, facebook.com/EarthCache. And sometimes people direct message me through that page as well. So that's another way to get in touch with me.
Nice. Nice. Sorry, my voice cracked there. Nice. Thanks. Thank you for joining us, Matt. This has been an awesome episode. Remember, listeners, we want you to come with us on this journey of discovery. So send us your questions, ideas, and feedback through our social media. Once we can get out and connect again, find us at events and chat with us too.
Absolutely. Listeners, be a part of the discussion. We want the show to include your thoughts and input, as your thoughts matter to us. Okay, Keats, let's go.
Sounds good, Jay. I'm ready.
All right. This is Planet Earth is a Wander Network production hosted by LANMonkey.ca and produced by Jay Kennedy and Keats Morton. Join us every 2 weeks for new content and send us your feedback. This podcast can be downloaded from iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Podcast. Music is Hear the Noise by John Deley and the 41 Players, CC copyright fair use. Podcast is content copyright Creative Commons 3.0 2021 by JJ Kennedy. Now, get out there and have another awesome spin around on our planet Earth.